Chapter 4 Part 1 of the Life and Letters of Elizabeth Prentiss by George Prentiss. This recording is in the public domain. Recording by Teresa Downey. On the 16th of April, 1845, Miss Payson was married to the Reverend George Lewis Prentiss, then just ordained as pastor of the South Trinitarian Church in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Here she passed the next 5½ years, years rendered memorable by precious friendships formed in them, by the birth of 2 of her children, by the death of her mother, and by other deep joys and sorrows. New Bedford was then known the world over as the most important centre of the whale fishery. In quest of the leviathans of the deep, its ships traversed all seas, from the tumbling icebergs of the Arctic Ocean to the Southern Pacific. But it was also known nearer home for the fine social qualities of its people. Many of the original settlers of the town were Quakers, and its character had been largely shaped by their friendly influence. Husbands and wives, whether young or old, called each other everywhere by their Christian names, and a charming simplicity marked the daily intercourse of life. Into this attractive society Mrs. Prentiss was at once welcomed. The Arnold family in particular, a family representing alike the friendly spirit, the refinement and taste, the wealth and the generous hospitality of the place, here deserve mention. Their kindness was unwearied. Flowers and fruit often came from their splendid garden and greenhouses, and in various other ways they contributed from the moment of her coming to render New Bedford a pleasant home to her. But it was in her husband's parish that she found her chief interest and joy. His people at first welcomed her in the warmest manner on her sainted father's account, but they soon learned to love her for her own sake. She early began to manifest among them that wonderful sympathy which made her presence like sunshine in sick rooms and in the house of mourning, and in later years endeared her through her writings to so many hearts, while her natural shyness and reserve caused her to shrink from everything like publicity, and even from that leadership in the more private activities of the church which properly belonged to her sex and station. Any kind of trouble instantly aroused and called into play all her energies. The sickness and death of little children wrought upon her with singular power, and in ministering aid and comfort to bereaved mothers she seemed like one specially anointed of the Lord for this gentle office. Now, after the lapse of more than 1/3 of a century, there are those in New Bedford and its vicinity who bless her memory as they recall scenes of sharp affliction cheered by her presence and her loving sympathy. The following reminiscence by one of her New Bedford friends, written not long after her death, belong here. Oh, that I had the pen of a ready writer! How gladly would I depict her just as she came to New Bedford, a youthful bride and our pastor's wife, more than 1/3 of a century ago. My remembrances of her are still as fresh and delightful, but they have been for so many years silent memories that I feel quite unable fully to express them, and yet I will try to give you a few simple details. Several things strike me as I recall her in those days. Our early experiences in the struggle of life had been somewhat similar, and this drew us nearer to each other. She was naturally very shy, and in the presence of strangers or of uncongenial persons her reserve was almost painful. But with her friends, especially those of her own sex, all this vanished, and she was full of animated talk. Her conversation abounded in bright, pointed sayings, in fine little touches of humor, in amusing anecdotes and incidents of her own experience, which she related with astonishing ease and fluency, sometimes also in downright girlish fun and drollery, and all was rendered doubly attractive by her low, sweet woman's voice and her merry, fitful laugh. Yet these things were but the sparkle of a very deep and serious nature. Even then her religious character was to me wonderful. She seemed always to know just what was prompting her, whether nature or grace, and her perception of the workings of the two principles was like an instinct, while I, though cherishing a Christian hope, was still struggling in bondage under the law. She appeared to enjoy to the full the glorious liberty of the children of God, and when I would say to her that I was constantly doing that which I ought not, and leaving undone so much that I ought to do, she would try to comfort me, and to encourage me to exercise more faith by responding, "Oh, you don't know what a great sinner I am, but Christ's love is greater still." There was a helpful, assuring, sunshiny influence about her piety which I have rarely seen or felt in any other human being. And almost daily, during all the years of separation, I have been conscious of this influence in my own life. I remember her as very retiring in company, even among our own people, but if there were children present, she would gather them about her, and hold them spellbound by her talk. Oh, she was a marvelous story teller! How often I have seen her in the midst of a little group, who, all eyes and ears, gazed into her face, and eagerly swallowed every word, while she, intent on amusing them, seemed quite unconscious that anybody else was in the room. Mr. H. used to say, "How I envy those children, and wish I were one of them." Mrs. Prentiss received much attention from persons outside of our congregation, and who, from their position and wealth, were pretty exclusive in their habits, but they could not resist the attraction of her rare gifts and accomplishments. New Bedford at that time, as you know, had a good deal of intellectual and social culture. This was particularly the case among the Unitarians, whose minister, when you came to us, was that excellent and very superior man, the Reverend Ephraim Peabody, D.D., afterwards of King's Chapel in Boston. One of the leading families of his flock was the Arnold family, whose garden and grounds were then among the finest in the State, and at whose house such men as Richard H. Dana, the poet, the late Professor Agassiz, and others eminent for their literary and scientific attainments, were often to be seen. This whole family were warmly attached to Mrs. Prentiss, and after you left New Bedford, often referred to their acquaintance with her in the most affectionate manner. And I believe Mr. Arnold and his daughter used to visit you in New York. The father, mother, daughter, and aunt are all gone. And what a change have all these vanished years wrought in the South Trinitarian Society! I can think of only 6 families then worshiping there that are worshiping there now. But so long as a single one remains, the memory of Mrs. Prentiss will still be precious in the old church. The story of the New Bedford years may be told with slight additions here and there by Mrs. Prentiss's own pen. Most of her letters to her own family are lost, but the letters to her husband, when occasionally separated from her, and others to old friends, have been preserved and afforded an almost continuous narrative of this period. A few extracts from some of those written in 1845 will show in what temper of mind she entered upon her new life. The first is dated Portland, January both, just after Mr. Prentiss received the call to New Bedford. I have wished all along, beyond anything else, not so much that we might have a pleasant home, pleasant scenery and circumstances, good society, and the like, as that we might have good, holy influences about us, and God's grace and love within us. And for you, dear George, I did not so much desire the intellectual and other attractions about which we have talked sometimes, as a dwelling place among those who you might train heavenward, or who would not be a hindrance in your journey thither. Through this whole affair I know I have thought infinitely more of you than of myself. And if you are happy at the North Pole, shan't I be happy there too? I shall be heartily thankful to see you a pastor with a people to love you, only I shall be jealous of them. To her friend Miss Thurston, she writes from New Bedford, April 28th. I thank you with all my heart for your letter, and for the very pretty gift which I suppose to be the work of your own hands. I cannot tell you how inexpressibly dear to me are all the expressions of affection I have received and am receiving from old friends. We have been here 10 days, and very happy days they have been to me, notwithstanding I have had to see so many strange faces, and to talk to so many new people. And both my sister and Anna tell me that the first months of married life are succeeded by far happier ones still. So I shall go on my way rejoicing. As to what your brother says about disappointment, nobody believes his doctrine better than I do. But life is as full of blessings as it is of disappointments, I conceive, and if we only know how, we may often out of mere will get the former instead of the latter. I have had some experience of the conflict and dismay of this present evil world, but then I have also had some of its smiles. Neither of these have ever made me angry with this life, or in love with it. I believe I am pretty cool and philosophical, but it won't do for me at this early day to be boasting of what it is in me. I shall have to wait till circumstances bring it out. I can only answer for the past and the present, the one having been blessed and gladdened, and the other being made happy and cheerful by lover and husband. I'll tell you truly, as I promised to do, if my heart sings another tune on the 17th of April, 1848. I only hope I shall enter soberly and thankfully on my new life, expecting sunshine and rain, drought and plenty, heat and cold, and adapting myself to alternations contentedly. But who knows? We are boarding at a hotel, which is not over pleasant. However, we have 2 good rooms, and have home things about us. I like to sit at work while Mr. Prentiss writes his sermons, and he likes to have me so. For the present, a study can be dispensed with. In a few weeks we hope to get to housekeeping. I like New Bedford very much. To her husband she writes April 18th. I cannot help writing you again, though I did send you a letter last night. It is a very pleasant morning, and I think of you all the time, and love you with the happiest tears in my eyes. I have just been making some nice crispy gingerbread to send Mrs. H., as she has no appetite, and I thought anything from home would taste good to her. I hope this will please you. Mother called with me to see her yesterday. She looks very ill. I have no idea she will ever get well. We had a nice time at the garden last night. Mr. and Miss Arnold came out and walked with us nearly an hour, though tea was waiting for them, and Miss A. was very particularly attentive to me, for your dear sake, and gave me flowers, beautiful ones, and spoke with much interest of your sermons. Oh, I am ready to jump for joy when I think of seeing you home again. Do please be glad as I am. I suppose your mother wants you too, but then she can't love you as I do. I'm sure she can't, with all the children among whom she has to divide her heart. Give my best love to her and Abby. How I wish I were back in Portland helping you pack your books. But I can't write any more, as we are going to Mrs. Gibbs to tea. Mother is reading Hamlet in her room. She is enjoying herself very much. Mrs. Gibbs, whose name occurs in this letter, was one of those inestimable friends who fulfill the office of mother, as it were, to the young minister's wife. She was tenderly attached to Mrs. Prentiss, and her loving kindness, which was new every morning and fresh every evening, ceased only with her life. Her husband, the late Captain Robert Gibbs, was like her in unwearied devotion to both the pastor and the pastor's wife. The summer was passed in getting settled in her new home, and receiving visits from old friends. Early in the autumn she spent several weeks in Portland. After her return, November 2nd, she writes to Miss Thurston: I was in Portland after you had left, and got quite rested and recruited after my summer's fatigue, so that I came home with health and strength, if not to lay my hand to the plow, to apply it to the broom handle and other articles of domestic warfare. Just what I expected would befall me has happened. I have got immersed in the whirlpool of petty cares and concerns, which swallow up so many other and higher interests, and talk as anxiously about good help and bad as the rest of 'em do. I sometimes feel really ashamed of myself to see how virtuously I fancy I am spending my time if in the kitchen, and how it seems to be wasted if I venture to take up a book. I take it that wives who have no love and enthusiasm for their husbands are more to be pitied than blamed if they settle down into mere cooks and good managers. We've had right pleasant times since coming home, never pleasanter than when, for a day or two, I was without help, and my husband ground coffee and drew water for me, and thought everything I made tasted good. One of the deacons of our church, a very old man, prays for me once a week at meeting, especially that my husband and I may be mutual comforts and enjoyments of each other, which makes us laugh a little in our sleeves, even while we say amen in our hearts. We have been reading aloud Mary Howitt's Author's Daughter, which is a very good story indeed. Don't ask me if I have read anything else. My mind has become a complete mummy, and therefore incapable of either receiving or originating a new idea. I did wade through a sea of words and nonsense on my way home in the shape of 2 works of Professor Wilson, The Foresters and Margaret Lindsay, which I fancy he wrote before he was out of his mother's arms, or soon after leaving them. The girls in Portland are marrying off like all possessed. It reminds me of a shovel full of pop corn, which the more you watch it the more it won't pop, till at last it all goes racketing off at once, pop, 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 without your having time to say Jack Robinson between. My position as wife of a minister secures for me many affectionate attentions, and opens to me many little channels of happiness which conspire to make me feel contented and at home here. I do not know how a stranger would find New Bedford people, but I am inclined to think society is hard to get into, though its heart is warm when once you do get in. We are very pleasantly situated, and our married life has been abundantly blessed. I doubt if we could fail to be contented anywhere if we had each other to love and care for. We went to hear Templeton sing last night. I was perfectly charmed with his hunting song, and with some others, and better judges than I were equally delighted. I had a letter from Abby last week. She is in Vicksburg, and in fine spirits, and fast returning health. Her letters, dated during 1846, glow with the sunshine of domestic peace and joy. In its earlier months her health was unusually good, and she depicts her happiness as something wonderful. All the day long her heart, she says, was running over with a love and delight she could not begin to express. But her letters also show that already she was having foretastes of that baptism of suffering which was to fit her for doing her Master's work. In January she revisited Portland, where she had the pleasure of meeting Professor and Mrs. Hopkins with their little boy, and of passing several weeks in the society of her own and her husband's family. But Portland had now lost for her much of its attraction. "I've seen all the folks," she wrote, "and we've said about all we've got to say to each other, and though I love to be at home, of course it is not the home it used to be before you had made such another dear, dear home for me. Oh, do you miss me? Do you feel a little bit sorry you let me leave you? Do say yes. But I can't write. I'm so happy. I'm so glad I'm going home." Early in December her first child was born. Writing a few weeks later to Mrs. Stearns, she thus refers to this event: "What a world of new sensations and emotions come with the first child! I was quite unprepared for the rush of strange feelings, still more so for the saddening and chastening effect. Why should the world seem more than ever empty when one has just gained the treasure of a living and darling child?" The saddening effect, in her own case, was owing in part, no doubt, to anxiety occasioned by the fatal illness of her husband's eldest sister, to whom she was tenderly attached. The following letter was written under the pressure of this anxiety: To Miss Thurston, New Bedford, January 31st, 1847. I dare say the idea of Lizzie Payson with a baby seems quite funny to you, as it does to many of the Portland girls, but I assure you it doesn't seem in the least funny to me, but as natural as life, and I may add as wonderful almost. She is a nice little plump creature, with a fine head of dark hair, which I take some comfort in brushing round a quill to make it curl, and a pair of intelligent eyes, either black or blue, nobody knows which. I find the care of her very wearing, and have cried ever so many times from fatigue and anxiety. But now I am getting a little better, and she pays me for all I do. She is a sweet, good little thing, her chief fault being a tendency to dissipation and sitting up late o' nights. The ladies of our church have made her a beautiful little wardrobe, fortunately for me. I had a lot of company all summer, my sister, her husband and boy, Mr. Stearns and Anna, Mother Prentiss, Julia Willis, etc. I had also my last visit from Abby, whom I little thought then I should never see again. Our happiness in our little one has been checked by our constant anxiety with regard to Abby's health, and it is very hard now for me to give up one who has become in every sense a sister, and not even to have the privilege of bidding her farewell. George went down about a week since, and will remain till all is over. I do not even know that while I write she is yet living. She had only one wish remaining, and that was to see George, and she was quite herself the day of his arrival, as also the day following, and able to say all she desired. Since then she has been rather unconscious of what was passing, and I fervently trust that by this time her sufferings are over, and that she is where she longed and prayed to be. You can have no idea how alike are the emotions occasioned by a birth and a death in the family. They seem equally solemn to me, and I am full of wonder at the mysterious new world into which I have been thrown. I used to think that the change I saw in young, giddy girls when they became mothers was owing to suffering and care wearing upon the spirits, but I see now that its true source lies far deeper. My brother H. has been married a couple of months, so I have one sister more. I shall be glad when they are all married. Some sisters seem to feel that their brothers are lost to them on their marriage, but if I may judge by my husband, there is fully as much gain as loss. I am sure no son or brother could be more devoted to mother and sisters than he is. Of course the baby is his perfect comfort and delight, but I need not enlarge on this point, as I suppose you have seen papas with their first babies. A great sucking of a very small thumb admonishes me that the little lady in the crib meditates crying for supper, so I must hurry off my letter. Abby Lewis Prentiss died on Saturday, January 30th, 1847, at the age of 32. Long and wearisome sufferings, such as usually attend pulmonary disease, preceded the final struggle. It was toward the close of a stormy winter's day that she gently fell asleep. A little while before she had imagined herself in a very beautiful region, which her tongue in vain attempted to describe, surrounded by those she loved. Among her last half conscious utterances was the name of her brother Sargent. The next morning witnessed a scene of such wondrous splendor and loveliness as made the presence of death seem almost incredible. The snowfall and mist and gloom had ceased, and as the sun rose, clear and resplendent, every visible object, the earth, trees, houses, shone as if enameled with gold and pearls and precious stones. It was the Lord's day, and well did the aspect of nature symbolize the glory of Him who is the resurrection and the life. On receiving the news of his sister's death, her brother Sargent, writing to his mother, thus depicted her character: "My heart bleeds to the core as I sit down to mingle my tears with yours, my dear beloved mother. I cannot realize that it is all over, that I shall never again in this world see our dear, dear Abby. Gladly would I have given my own life to preserve hers. But we have consolation even in our extreme grief, for she was so good that we know she is now in heaven, and freed from all care, unless it be that her affectionate heart is still troubled for us whom she loved so well. We can dwell with satisfaction, after we have overcome the first sharpness of our grief, upon her angel-like qualities, which made her, long before she died, fit for the heaven where she now is. You have lost the purest, noblest, and best of daughters. I, a sister who never, to my knowledge, did a selfish act or uttered a selfish thought. With the exception of yourself, dear mother, she was, of all our family circle, the best prepared to enter her Father's house." Some extracts from letters written at this time will show the tenderness of Mrs. Prentiss's sisterly love and sympathy, and give a glimpse also of her thoughts and occupations as a young mother. To Mrs. Stearns, New Bedford, February 17, 1847. If I loved you less, my dear Anna, I could write you 20 letters, where I now can hardly get courage to undertake one. How very dearly I do love you! I never knew till it rushed upon my mind that we might sometime lose you as we have lost dear Abby. How mysteriously your and Mary's and my baby are given to us just at this very time when our hearts are so sore that we were almost afraid to expose them to new sufferings by taking in new objects of affection. But it does seem to me a great mercy that, trying as it is in many respects, these births and this death come almost hand in hand. Surely we 3 young mothers have learned lessons of life that must influence us forever in relation to these little ones. I have been like one in the midst of a great cloud since the birth of our baby, entirely unconscious of how much I love her, but I am just beginning to take comfort in and feel sensible affection for her. I long to show the dear little good creature to you, but I can hardly give up my long cherished plans and hopes in regard to Abby's seeing and loving our first child. Almost as much as I depended on the sympathy and affection of my own mother in relation to this baby, I was depending on Abby's. But I rejoice that she is where she is, and would not have her back again in this world of sin and conflict and labor for 1,000 times the comfort her presence could give. But you don't know how I dread going home next summer and not finding her there. It was a great mercy that you could go down again, dear Anna, and indeed there are manifold mercies in this affliction, how many we may never know till we get home to heaven ourselves and find, perhaps, that this was one of the invisible powers that helped us on our way thither. I had a sweet little note from your mother to day. I would give anything if I could go right home and make her adopt me as her daughter by a new adoption, and be a real blessing and comfort to her in this lonely, dark time. Eddie Hopkins calls my baby his. How children want to use the possessive case in regard to every object of interest! I find the blanket that Mrs. Gibbs knit for me so infinitely preferable from its elasticity to common flannel that I could not help knitting one for you. If I say that I have thought as many affectionate thoughts to you while knitting it as it contains stitches, I fancy I speak nothing but truth and soberness, for I love you now with the love I have returned on my heart from Abby, who no longer is in want of earthly friends. Dear little baby thought I was knitting for her special pleasure, for her bright eyes would always follow the needles as she lay upon my lap, and she would smile now and then as if thanking me for my trouble. The ladies have given her an elegant cloak, and Miss Arnold has just sent her a little white satin bonnet that was made in England, and is quite unlike anything I ever saw. Only to think, I walked down to church last Sunday and heard George preach once more. March 3. We could with difficulty, and by taking turns, get through reading your letter, not only because you so accurately describe our own feelings in regard to dear Abby, but because we feel so keenly for you. I often detect myself thinking, now I will sit down and write Abby a nice long letter, or imagining how she will act when we go home with our baby, and as you say, I dream about her almost every night. I used to always dream of her as suffering and dying, but now I see her just as she was when well, and hear her advising this and suggesting that, just as I did when she was here last summer. Life seems so different now from what it did. It seems to me that my youth has been touched by Abby's death, and that I can never be so cheerful and light-hearted as I have been. But, dear Anna, though I doubt not that this is still more the case for you, and that you see far deeper into the realities of life than I do, we have both the consolations that are to be found in Christ, and these will remain to us when the buoyancy and youthful spirit have gone from our hearts. March 12. I had been reading a marriage sermon to George from Martyria, and we were having a nice conjugal talk just as your little stranger was coming into the world. G. is so hurried and driven that he cannot get a moment in which to write. He has a funeral this afternoon, that of Mrs. H., a lady whom he has visited for 2 years, and part, if not all of that time, once a week. I have made several calls since I wrote you last, 2 of them to see babies, one of whom took the shine quite off mine with his great blue-black eyes and eyelashes that lay halfway down his cheeks. The latter part of April she visited Portland. While there she wrote to her husband, April 27th. Just as I had the baby to sleep, and this letter dated, I was called down to see Dr. and Mrs. Dwight and their little Willie. The baby woke before they had finished their call, and behaved as prettily and looked as bright and lovely as a heart could wish. Dr. Dwight held her a long time and kissed her heartily. I got your letter soon after dinner, and from the haste and the je ne sais quoi with which it was written, I feared you were not well. Alas, I am full of love and fear. How came you to walk to Dartmouth to preach? Wasn't it by far too long a walk to take in one day? I heard Dr. Caruthers on Sunday afternoon. He made the finest allusion to my father I have ever heard, and mother thought of it as I did. To-day I have had a good many callers, among the rest Deacon Lincoln. When he saw the baby, he said, "Oh, what a homely creature! Do tell if the New Bedford babies are all so ugly." Mrs. S., thinking him in earnest, rose up in high dudgeon and said, "Why, we think her beautiful, Deacon Lincoln." "Well, I don't wonder," said he. "I expect she will get measles and everything else, for lots of children come to see her and eat her up. Mother, baby, and I spend to morrow at your mother's. Do up a lot of sleeping and grow fat, pray do. And oh, love me and think I am a darling little wife, and write me loving words in your next letter. Wednesday. We have a fine day for going up to your mother's, and the baby is bright as a button and full of fun. Aren't you glad? To Mrs. Stearns, Portland, May 22, 1847. We have just been having a quiet little Saturday evening talk about dear Abby, as we sat here before the lighting of the lamps, and I dare say I was not the only one who wished you here too. I came up here from my mother's on Monday morning, and have had a delightful week. I cannot begin to tell you how glad I am that we are going to make you a little visit on our way home. I do so want to see you and your children, and show you our darling little baby, that I can hardly wait till the time comes. I suppose you have got your little folks off to bed, and so if you will take a peep into the parlor here, you will see how we are all occupied. Mother in her rocking chair, with her specs on, studying my dewees on children. George toe to toe with her, reading some old German book, and Lina curled upon the sofa, asleep, I fancy, while I sit in the corner and write you from dear Abby's desk with her pen. Mercy and Sophia watch over the cradle in the dining room, where mother's 15th grandchild reposes unconscious of the honor of sleeping where honorables, reverends, and reverendesses have slumbered before her. How strange it seems that my baby is one of this family, bone of their bone and flesh of their flesh. I need not say how we miss dear Abby, for you will see at once that that which was months ago a reality to you has just become such to me. It pains me to my heart's core to hear how she suffered. Dear, dear Abby! How I did love her, and how thankful I am for her examples to imitate, and her excellencies to rejoice in. Your Uncle James Lewis spent last night here, and this morning he prayed a delightful prayer, which really softened my whole soul. I do not know when I have had my own wants so fervently expressed, or been more edified at family worship, and his allusion to Abby was very touching. The following extracts from letters written to her husband while he was absent in Maine may be thought by some to go a little too much into the trifling details of daily life and feeling, but do not such details, after all, form no small part of the moral warp and woof of human experience? To her husband, New Bedford, August 27. I heard this morning that old Mrs. Kendrick was threatened with typhus fever, and went down soon after breakfast to see how she did. And as I found Mrs. Henrietta had watched with her and was looking all worn out, I begged her to let me have her baby this afternoon, that she might have a chance to rest. So after dinner Sophia went down and got her. At first she set up a lamentable scream, but we huddled on her cloak and put her with our baby into the carriage and gave them a ride. She is a proper heavy baby, and my legs ache well with trotting round the streets after the carriage. Think of me as often as you can, and pray for me, and I will think of you and pray for you all the time. Tuesday evening. You see I am writing you a sort of little journal, as you say you like to know all I do while you are away. Our sweet little baby makes your absence far less intolerable than it used to be before she came to comfort me. I have felt all soul and as if I had no body ever since your precious letter came this morning. I have so pleased myself with imagining how funny and nice it would be if I could creep in unperceived by you and hear your oration. I long to know how you got through, and what Mr. Stearns and Mr. Smith thought of it. I always pray for you more when you are away than I do when you are at home, because I know you are interrupted and hindered about your devotions more or less when journeying. I have had callers a great part of to day, among them Mrs. Leonard, Mrs. General Thompson, Mrs. Randall, and Captain Clark. Captain C. asked for nobody but the baby. The little creature almost sprang into his arms. He was much gratified, and held her a long while, kissing and caressing her. I think it was pretty work for you to go reading your oration to your mother and old Mrs. Coe, when you hadn't read it to me. I felt a terrible pang of jealousy when I came to that in your letter. I'm going now to call on Miss Arnold. Friday, September 3. Yesterday afternoon I was perfectly wretched. It came over me, as things will in spite of us, suppose he didn't get safely to Brunswick? And for several hours I could not shake it off. It had all the power of reality, and made me so faint that I could do nothing, and fairly had to go to bed. I suppose it was very silly, and if I had not tried in every way to rise above it, might have been even wicked. But it frightened me to find how much I am under the power of mere feeling and fancy. But do not laugh at me. Sometimes I say to myself, what madness to love any human being so intensely! What would become of you if he were snatched from you? And then I think that though God justly denies us comfort and support for the future, and bids us lean upon Him now, and trust Him for the rest, He can give us strength for the endurance of His most terrible chastisements when their hour comes. Saturday. I am a mere baby when I think of your getting sick in this time of almost universal sickness and sorrow and death. Yesterday Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Leonard took me, with Sophia and baby, to the cemetery, and on a long ride of 3 hours, all of which was delightful. In the afternoon baby had an ill turn, which alarmed me excessively, because so many children are sick. But I gave her medicine, and I think she will soon be well again. Mrs. Gibbs and Mrs. Randall and others sent me yesterday a dozen large peaches, 2 melons, a lot of shell beans and tomatoes, a dish of blackberries, and some fried corn cakes, not an atom of the whole of which shall I touch, taste, handle, or smell, so you need not fear my killing myself. Mrs. Captain Delano, where the Reverend Mr. Brock from England stayed, has just lost 2 children after a few days' illness. They were buried in one coffin. Old Gideon Howland, the richest man here, is also dead. The papers are full of deaths. Our dear baby is 9 months old to day, and may God, if He sees best, spare her to us as many more, and if He does not, I feel as if I could give her up to Him, but we don't know what we can do until the time comes. I hear her sweet little voice downstairs, and it sounds happy, so I guess she feels pretty comfortable. Sabbath evening. The baby is better, and I dare say it is my imagination that says she looks pale and puny. She is now asleep in your study, whereto I am sitting in your chair. I came down as soon as I could this morning, and have stayed here all day. It is so quiet and pleasant among your books and papers, and it was so dull upstairs. I thought before your letter came, while standing over the green, grassy graves of Lizzie Reed, Mary Rodman, and Mrs. Cadwell, how I should love to have dear Abby in such a green, sweet spot where we could sometimes go together to talk of her. I must own I should like to be buried under grass and trees rather than cold stone and heavy marble. Should not you? End of Chapter 4, Part 1 of the Life and Letters of Elizabeth Prentiss, by George Prentiss. Recording by Teresa Downey.